We have Grandmaster Gukesh, the world champion, coming to the game. He is going to face one of the best players in the world, Wesley So. A very exciting battle at the Super Blitz 2026. This is round number 13 of Blitz. Wesley has been one of the leaders in this tournament, closely pursuing Hans Niemann here. And Gukesh settles down. It's going to be very fun. The players are ready. 5 minutes plus 2 seconds increment, a handshake, and off we go. D4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight to f3, and Gukesh plays the queen's gambit declined. And we have the Ragozin on the board. What is Wesley's choice going to be? He takes on d5, ed, and bishop g5, pinning the knight. h6, bishop goes back, and Gukesh quickly gets his bishop on this diagonal. Often when you play bishop to f5, queen b3 starts to become a problem because not only does it attack the bishop but also the pawn. But first Wesley plays e3, the knight comes out to d7. Gukesh has this all prepped up. This could very well be his world championship preparation, and one should always be careful of moves like g5 and knight jumping into e4. Gukesh calmly plays his pawn to c6. Wesley brings the queen, attacking the bishop. The queen defends the bishop here, and already black seems to be having a very comfortable position, because Wesley would have loved to put his bishop on d3, but already black's bishop controls this diagonal. Black castles, white castles as well, and now the bishop comes back, offering a trade of queens. Does Wesley take it? Well, he's going for the bishop. He plays bishop g3. And now taking on b3 could be an idea. First Gukesh takes on g3, hg, and plays this very interesting move, knight e8. In the Carlsbad structure, which is this one, this pawn structure, you often want as black the knight to go to d6. Because on d6, it defends the b7 pawn, looks at the c4 square, also the e4 square. Knight comes back to d2. Wesley is getting ready to take back on b3 with the knight, and Gukesh can continue with knight to d6 here, but he can also go knight f6, keeping control of the e4 square. He plays it, knight comes out to f6, and we have Gukesh having a time lead of 4 minutes 42 seconds. Wesley has 4 minutes 17 seconds. f3, maybe this is the plan that white could be angling for. f3, g4, e4. He goes queen a3, and Gukesh quickly plays a5. The plan could very well be now to play queen to b4 when the queen on a3 is misplaced. I think Wesley's idea was to stop knight d6, but Gukesh was so quick with this move a5. Wesley says, okay, I change my plans. I go queen b3. Now you can take, but you can also play queen to b4. He first takes, a b3 taken. Interesting move. Knight to d6, jumping in. Rook comes to a1, putting pressure on the a5 pawn. The plan could very well be to play pawn to b6 here, and then slowly try to expand in the center with c5. Black's position has no issues. Rook e8, rook c8 is also possible, but white has a clear plan now, it seems. Rook a4, rook a1, try for the b4 break. And Gukesh does go b6. It's a good move. And now Wesley So goes rook to a4. He's doubling down the a file. He gets the rook off the a file. Rook a b8 played. And now can we go b4? That seems like a possible move. ab, rook b4, and then getting the other rook to a1. But b5 followed by the knight jumping in could be an idea. So many possibilities. Wesley goes rook c1. He's looking at the c6 pawn. I guess Gukesh can simply defend rook c8 with rook, c6 pawn with rook fc8. Oh, he first goes bishop to d7. And his idea could now be to play c5, hitting the rook on the a4 square. I think Gukesh is feeling comfortable about his position. He wants to continue fighting. So does Wesley, I'm pretty sure. Okay, maybe have to get the rook out from there. That seems like the logical thing to do. But maybe if you play c5, I could go back rook a1 and he plays knight f3. Rook c8, quickly played. Knight to e5, attacking the bishop. The bishop drops back. Gukesh could have pushed his pawn to c5, but I think Wesley would have just come back. So that's why this sequence now brings his rook back to a1. And these are the kinds of positions where it's around equal, but mistakes do happen for both sides. I guess rook a8 is what one could do. I think bringing the king in could also be a plan. King f8, king e7, h5 with the idea of g6, just improving the pawns there. I was also thinking if knight d7 makes any sense to get rid of this very active knight on e5. Many possible ideas here. And Gukesh slowing down a bit, thinking through his next set of ideas. And he goes rook a8. But knight a4, a good move. He's attacking the b6 pawn. And Gukesh comes back. Wesley comes back. Who wants a draw? I don't think either of them. But will Gukesh repeat here is the question. And how to even continue the play. He goes h5. The plan, one of the plans that we mentioned. Gaining some space on the queen side. Also clamping down the g3, g2 pawns. Both players, if they play on, the time will come down. Right now, both of them have around 2 minutes on the clock. f3, Wesley starts doing something active. He wants his king to come up to f2 and later push e4. Pawn to c5 played. A nice move here by Gukesh. If you take here, I think he wants to take back with the rook. Because if you take back with the pawn, the a5 pawn is hanging, although the b3 pawn is also hanging. So he goes king f2. He does not touch it. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. Would the d4 pawn become weak? Like knight f5. So cd, ed, knight f5 could be an idea. And Gukesh goes pawn to g6. Rook d1 played, eyeing the d5 pawn. And one of the threats could be now to take and win the d5 pawn. And Gukesh takes on d4. I think ed4, rook d4, both are possible. But rook d4 more natural because now the d5 pawn is a weakness. But Gukesh does have knight f5 here, which is a good move. I personally think that Wesley's position has improved slightly with the d5 pawn becoming a weakness. Gukesh does go knight f5, attacking the rook. I think rook has to come back to d2. Oh, but there's also rook f4. Does that make sense? Because then you are threatening g4 takes and the f6 knight is hanging. No, he goes rook d2. Goes back. And now threatening to take and rook takes. Although I'm not so sure winning that pawn makes sense because the black rook could enter in with rook c2. He does defend it here on the d5 square. Knight e7. Wesley comes back, rook d4. Gukesh goes back, knight f5. Maybe now Gukesh is happy with a draw here. But is Wesley happy? Because Wesley might be feeling that this is his chance to catch Hans Niemann in the tournament and play for the top spot. Repeat or not is the question. He goes rook f4. He's fighting on. This time Gukesh has to take care of his knight on f6. He goes king g7. A good move. His g4. His knight is already well defended. Bishop d3 played. Attacking the knight. The knight comes back. b4. Whoa. Wesley So finding some creative ideas. His rook could get activated. This rook is defending b4. Now for Gukesh, is g5 an attractive move? Maybe, to kick the knight away. There's also another plan which is kind of tricky. You just ignore this because take would mean b2 is hanging and you play knight h7, knight f8, knight e6. That's too complicated. He goes rook a8. Here Gukesh defends the a5 pawn. And Wesley goes rook to d4. Brings his rook into the center of the board. And now pawn to a4. Oh, Gukesh was like, should I play it, not play it? a4 has been played. Rook to a3. And b5. If you take on b5 twice, then rook comes into c2 and picks up the b2 pawn. So that's the plan. Gukesh on 36 seconds. Wesley has slightly more seconds, but he's thinking through here. The pressure is rising. Bishop e2. Clock is going to play a huge role. 36 seconds to both the players. Oh my god. Where does Gukesh go next? Maybe knight f5, hitting the rook. He goes rook b8. Bishop d3. Wesley brings his bishop back, but it seems the momentum is switching. Rook b6. I think Gukesh has a plan now. Rook e6 to attack this knight. You don't want to play f4. Knight can get the g4 square. Create some weaknesses. Wesley goes g4. A wonderful move actually. Rook e6, g5. And he takes on e5. G takes f6. King takes. You are a pawn up now as black, but f4. Rook goes back. Takes on d5. Takes on d5. Rook takes d5. And it's equalized material. b5 could be a weakness, but rook c1, getting the rook active, giving back the pawn. Bishop b5 takes. Rook c2 check. You want to win this pawn. That's the idea. He goes rook to c5. But this allows, oh, small inaccuracy. Gukesh's pawns start rolling. Wesley quickly comes back. If you go rook c6, there is bishop b5, which you have to be careful about. And Gukesh now has 30 seconds. He comes back rook e7. He's maybe ready to go rook c7, bishop c2, attacking a4. b3 maybe? No, rook a7 played. Bishop comes to e4. Not a good move. Quickly get your king here. He goes king e7, king e2. And Gukesh now gives a rook a5. You know, he's attacking the c5 pawn. c6, king d6 and king c7 blocks the pawn. So rook c1, king d8. He's getting his king to c7. Great thinking. King d3. Wesley fighting hard. A pawn has been created as a passer here. Will it actually create any damage? Stops the pawn, but now that's not a great move. King c7. Black is in the driver's seat. Bishop goes back. And Gukesh quickly brings the bishop because the rook endgame is lost. So e4 played. Rook a4. Maybe a better move was a2 and rook coming in. But now king c3. He takes the pawn. And Wesley thinks that this is hanging. Rook d4. Comes back. Check. Beautiful defense. Pawn to f5 played. Everything is defended. Gukesh is now a pawn up. Wesley somehow missed this. And he goes bishop e2. And Gukesh attacks the bishop. Now g2 is hanging. a2 played. Pawn to g3. And he goes rook b2 with the idea of rook b1. King comes here. And he loses the bishop. Wesley trying to create some play with rook a6. Meanwhile, Hans Niemann has lost his game. So if Wesley can somehow hold this, he would be back in the tournament trying for the lead. But rook f3. He's going to win the g3 pawn, defend g6. Everything is protected. Wesley resigns. The world champion scores a win and he's relieved. What a game this was, with so much pressure in the middle game. In fact, nothing was moving ahead. Both of them were going like back and forth. But Gukesh kept his cool and beat one of the strong players out there in Blitz, Wesley So. A nice game, and we hope you enjoyed this one. This is Sagar Shah signing off. Bye bye.